Inside an indoor assembly hall, lifting equipment raised a tall metal frame until load control was lost, turning the original lift footprint into sudden drop path exposure. Inside a building construction area, a tall scaffold tower suddenly lost stability and began collapsing toward a nearby access path. At a multi-story building facade, a suspended forklift was being raised when the lifting arrangement lost support. Inside a metal stamping factory, a jam-clearing access entered the power press opening before full isolation, turning the closing stroke into an active compression hazard. Along a busy roadside work area, a mobile crane suddenly lost stability and the entire machine rotated into an uncontrolled overturn path. In a cable-winding workshop, a rotating spool kept pulling loose material inward while manual adjustment moved too close to the live reel. In a chemical processing unit, a reactor vessel was open for cleaning when a sudden flash release came from inside the equipment. At the construction yard, a trailer ramp was being lowered while the descent zone remained open inside the ramp's movement path. In a bakery production room, an open industrial dough mixer starts rotating while access to the lower mixing area stays uncontrolled. In a snowy construction yard, a mobile crane took on a heavy lift when the boom structure suddenly folded under rising mechanical stress. Inside a dairy processing room, routine work near a large mixing tank continued while active mechanical energy remained inside the work area. At a fuel station, two tanker trucks refuel side by side when vapor, ignition, and exposed equipment turn the lane explosive instantly. Inside a factory work area, a large circular assembly rose from a floor opening, then suddenly dropped back into the same space without warning. In a rebar fabrication yard, a rotating wire reel machine kept feeding material while the winding path remained exposed. In the parcel sorting area, the conveyor continued running as loose material and an exposed transfer point created an uncontrolled pull path. Inside a tight food counter, a rushed carry over a slick floor turns one misstep into a spreading hot liquid spill path instantly. On a freezing construction site, a drilling rig worked under heavy torque when a critical rotating component suddenly lost controlled attachment. At a deep industrial vessel opening, a fall arrest system suddenly activated when a guardrail became part of the load path. Inside a fabrication shop, a large sheet of glass left its intended support path during handling. Inside a crowded pressure piping room, valve movement released stored pressure directly into the work area. Inside a commercial kitchen, hidden gas buildup turned a simple burner ignition into a sudden pressure and flame release across the cooking area. Combustible gas areas require automated leak detection, strong ventilation, and pre-ignition atmosphere verification. Open flame or spark-producing equipment must remain inactive until sensory and mechanical checks confirm gas levels stay below explosive limits. In a narrow, sloped alley, a heavy mobile compressor began rolling downhill when a rope and pulley relocation suddenly lost positive mechanical control. Establish positive mechanical control before moving heavy equipment on any slope. Use engineered moving plans, rated restraints, wheel chocks, and exclusion boundaries, and never rely on manual positioning to control downhill load movement. In an industrial yard, a long suspended load drifted from its planned route and swept across the surrounding floor. The hazard was not the load overhead. It was the assumption that its path would remain predictable. Recognize that suspended loads can change direction without warning and avoid occupying any space that depends on the lift going exactly as planned. At the vegetation processing yard, unstable footing during material feeding shifted the handling path toward the mobile shredder. Establish physical barriers around shredder feed openings. Maintain stable footing during material handling and keep access routes separated from active intake and processing components. In an open industrial yard, a dump truck reversed through a busy vehicle lane while rear path access remained uncontrolled. Rear travel paths must be cleared before dump truck movement begins. Use spotters, alarms, mirrors, cameras, barricades, and full-stop communication before reversing through shared vehicle lanes. In an active haulage lane, cab exit timing overlapped with reversing truck movement, turning routine ground access into blind path exposure. Blind haulage lanes require positive control before any cab, exit, crossing, or ground-level access begins. Reversing trucks need radio confirmation, camera and alarm checks, and clear travel path separation before movement continues. At a manufacturing press station, material was being adjusted inside the die area when the machine's closing path unexpectedly activated. Establish a zero-access boundary around the point of operation whenever a press is capable of movement. Verify guards, interlocks, sensing devices, and energy isolation before any adjustment near the closing path or die area. Inside a chemical processing unit, a pressurized system released stored energy in a rapid flash beside running equipment. Normal appearance is not proof of zero energy. Verify isolation, pressure release, temperature status, and chemical condition before treating any quiet system as safe. In the narrow excavation beside the boundary wall, the excavator worked close to the structure when the unsupported section suddenly gave way. Maintain exclusion zones around excavation faces, retaining walls and adjacent structures, and keep all access routes clear whenever excavation activities may affect ground or structural support. Inside a work bay, a rope tied to a metal platform turned an unsecured support area into an unstable load path. Use approved rest and access areas only. Movable metal platforms must be unloaded, blocked, locked, and secured before any nearby activity enters their movement path. At a construction site, work beside an unreinforced wall shifted from routine parking side activity into a sudden masonry collapse path. Freestanding masonry and stacked block walls must be braced, reinforced, or isolated before nearby loading activity begins. Any unreinforced wall beside active equipment becomes a collapse path hazard the moment vibration, contact, or shifting load enters the area. At a mine shaft transfer station, a loaded cart was pushed toward a hoist landing while the shaft opening was exposed. Verify the hoist cage is present, locked and aligned at the landing before any cart transfer begins. Use interlocked gates, stop blocks, and fixed barriers to prevent equipment movement whenever the shaft opening is exposed. At a truck loading bay, a forklift attempted to lift two stacked pallet loads at once when the upper load slipped out of alignment mid-lift. The warning sign appeared before the lift began, separate loads behaving like one load only because gravity was temporarily holding them together. Stability should be confirmed, not assumed from appearance alone. At the foundation construction site, the suspended concrete form panel shifted while positioning activity remained inside the load travel area. Establish exclusion zones around suspended loads, keep access outside lift and swing paths, and maintain separation until the load is fully positioned, supported, and secured. The construction deck, a suspended concrete bucket swung offline and released through the lower work path. Secure suspended buckets before lifting, barricade the drop path, verify rigging, and keep lower deck areas clear during hoisting and positioning. Inside a machine shop, close positioning near a spinning lathe allowed loose material to enter the rotating chuck path within seconds. Rotating machinery requires fitted apparel, secured loose material, active guarding, and clear access boundaries before startup. Any loose fabric, glove, sleeve, or unsecured item near a spinning chuck can enter the rotation path within seconds. On a bridge construction deck, stacked steel members suddenly shifted, sending an entire section of the stack into the adjacent floor area. Keep the potential collapse path of stacked steel fully restricted before storage, staging, or adjustment begins. Secure all stored members with proper dunnage, restraints, and stacking methods, and establish controlled boundaries wherever material instability could develop. Inside a vehicle service bay, a raised car lost stable support over the lift area. When vehicle support becomes unstable, the surrounding area must remain clear until the load is mechanically secured. Use rated stands, verified lift points, and controlled lowering methods before access continues. Inside the pharmaceutical reactor area, routine material handling was underway when conditions around the processing system changed in an instant. Verify temperature, pressure, atmosphere, and process parameters before introducing materials into a reactor system and ensure all operating conditions remain within approved limits throughout the process. Inside a cargo hold packed with cotton yarn rolls, a floor strike creates static discharge, turning dry fibers into a sudden ignition source. Control static before fiber-packed cargo work. Ground conductive surfaces. Use anti-static footwear, ventilate the space, and separate ignition paths from dry cotton loads. In an outdoor loading yard, a crane-lifted container began shifting over a flatbed, turning manual guidance into suspended load control exposure. Maintain a strict perimeter around all suspended loads. Use taglines or remote control methods to steer heavy materials from ground level. Establish clear communication signals and secure the active lifting area before load movement continues. Inside a processing facility, loose clothing entered the in-running side of rotating machinery and was suddenly drawn into the machine path. Keep loose clothing, scarves, towels, gloves, and other unsecured items away from rotating equipment. Guard nip points, rollers, shafts, and in-running components, and maintain clear separation from moving machinery during operation. During a tree removal operation beside a building, a nearby crane ended up inside the tree's changing fall path. A planned fall direction is only a control assumption until the cut is complete. Keep equipment, rigging, and access routes outside any possible movement path created by trunk lean, hinge behavior, or load shift. Inside the auto repair shop, the routine service bay suddenly became an active vehicle path when a car entered the workspace without control. Verify the vehicles are secured, under control, and protected against unintended movement before beginning work. And keep service activities outside active vehicle travel paths whenever possible. On a bridge deck, stacked steel form panels shifted sideways, turning a narrow access lane into an uncontrolled metal movement path. Stack panels flat, chalked, tied, and supported before access. Keep side gaps clear until the bundle is stable, braced, and fully restrained. Inside a fabrication shop, an oxyacetylene torch was activated before the heat path was clear, turning setup confusion into sudden heat path exposure. Active thermal tools require controlled ignition, clear communication, and confirmed separation from nearby work areas. Before flame activation, verify torch direction, hose routing, ignition point, and heat path so the setup stays fully controlled. Inside a tire shop, a tire being inflated suddenly released stored pressure energy into the surrounding area. Approach every tire inflation task as a high-energy pressure operation. Use inflation cages, remote air chucks, and controlled setup positions so the potential release path stays clear during inflation. Inside a steel mill, a suspended process vessel released extreme heat and energy across an elevated work platform. Heat, pressure, and process material can travel beyond the visible equipment boundary during abnormal conditions. Establish controlled distance, shielding, and exclusion areas around elevated process vessels before operation begins. Beside the flatbed trailer loaded with massive steel coils, a routine securing task suddenly turned into an uncontrolled rolling energy event. Verify the coils are secured with engineered restraints, chocks, and load control systems before approaching, and keep all access routes outside potential rolling and release paths during loading or unloading operations. Inside a small shop, a trembling desk fan runs with unstable rotation until the front guard snaps open and parts launch forward. Shut down vibrating fans immediately, unplug power, keep the front path clear, and inspect guards, blades, and mounts before reuse. In a narrow exterior welding area beside parked vehicles and stacked materials, leaked fuel gas met an active flame, turning the work path into a sudden ignition hazard. Gas systems must be isolated, checked, and ventilated before any hot work begins. A torch, grinder, or welding arc should only enter the area after leak testing, cylinder control, hose inspection, and flammable gas monitoring confirm the space is clear. Escaped gas spreads invisibly and mixes with air until until it reaches a flammable range. Once ignition energy enters that mixture, the flame path can expand quickly through the gas cloud. No hot work near unverified gas lines. Confirm isolation, ventilation, and monitoring before the first arc strikes. Inside an automotive service bay, a vehicle entered the inspection lane slightly off alignment, sending one tire path toward the open pit edge. Verify vehicle alignment before guiding any vehicle over an inspection pit. Use wheel guides, marked approach paths, and controlled spotting to keep every tire centered on the supported travel surface. On the edge of an unfinished building, a rooftop hoist overturned during the lift while a suspended material load was being raised over an exposed drop. Material hoists are not fall protection systems. Verify anchorage, rated capacity, support structure, edge protection, and load path control before lifting over any exposed drop. At the bridge entrance, the truck contacted the overhead steel gate and turned a routine roadway crossing into a sudden structural collapse hazard. Verify load height, route restrictions, overhead clearances, and structural obstacles before transport begins, and use approved route planning for oversized or elevated loads. Inside a manufacturing cell, an active blue robot arm sweeps unexpectedly across the setup area, turning stored motion into a strike path. Keep robot cells guarded and interlocked. Pause motion before setup, adjustment, or material handling near the arm. At a construction loading area, an unsecured stone slab lost balance beside a dump truck, turning the vehicle edge into a falling load path. Heavy transport areas with leaning loads require controlled clearance areas. Fall trajectories must be identified, and access must remain outside the projected load path. Massive materials must be fully restrained before movement around the vehicle edge continues. Inside a machine shop, loose fabric near a running lathe drifted into the machine's rotating path. Stop and isolate rotating equipment before accessing areas behind or around the machine. Keep clothing secured and maintain unobstructed access to tools, controls, and materials. At a loading dock, a truck tail lift moved while access still sat inside a narrow pinch point between the platform and vehicle frame. A tail lift creates a moving pinch area whenever platform travel is possible. Keep access outside the platform frame clearance envelope and isolate movement before inspection, adjustment, or loading continues. Inside the chemical processing area, routine activity around the reactor line suddenly turned into a rapidly expanding flash fire hazard. Verify pressure, temperature, containment status, and ignition source controls before opening, sampling, transferring, or servicing process equipment, and maintain approved operating conditions throughout the task. Inside an industrial bay, access beneath a yellow robot lift entered the rising attachment's travel path. Under lift access must remain locked out and blocked. Lower the attachment, verify zero motion, and clear the lift path before any setup or adjustment begins. Inside a heavy equipment testing bay, a manual check beside an active test machine turned into sudden discharge path exposure as a component released outward. Manual checking must stay outside the discharge path, not just away from rotating parts. Stop the equipment, isolate the controls, verify zero motion and zero stored energy, and use remote or tool-assisted inspection before close access begins. If a component can release, the inspection position must stay clear of its release path. Inside an electrical switchgear room, energized equipment suddenly released high fault energy across the work area. De-energize equipment before work begins, verify isolation, and confirm the arc flash boundary before any task starts. Use task-specific PPE rated for the available fault energy, and keep access controlled around energized electrical gear. Inside a renovation area, a floor section gave way beneath cutting work directly above a concealed opening. Cutting work changes the support surface during the task. Verify hidden openings, support framing, and load-bearing limits before cutting, and reassess footing whenever the structure is altered. Inside the barbershop, a routine haircut suddenly turned into a fast-moving flash fire hazard when an ignition source met a flammable atmosphere. Keep open flames, sparking devices, and unapproved electrical equipment away from hair products, aerosol sprays, solvents, and other combustible vapors, and maintain adequate ventilation throughout the work area. Inside a crowded hotel kitchen, normal prep ran beside pressurized cooking equipment when a sudden pressure release sent loose material across the work tables and service path. Separate prep areas from live pressure and heat sources. Secure lids, gas lines, hoses, and vessels before use, and clear the pressure release path before opening or venting equipment. Inside a metal fabrication workshop, torch work near compressed gas equipment turned the work area into a sudden cylinder failure hazard. Pressure vessel safety demands secure storage, regular valve inspections, and flashback arresters. Safe handling of compressed gas cylinders requires keeping them upright, chained, and shielded from direct heat sources to prevent rapid overpressurization and structural failure. In a busy loading yard, a forklift carrying a large pallet approached a shared travel area where vehicle movement and crossing routes converged. Establish clear separation between forklift travel routes and crossing paths before material movement begins. Use designated walkways, controlled crossings, exclusion zones, and positive traffic management wherever industrial vehicles operate near shared access areas. On a crowded roadside area, a heavily stacked cargo load shifted sideways and spread into the active traffic space. Crowded surroundings can hide early instability cues. Create distance, secure the load, and control nearby traffic before a leaning or shifting stack becomes a wider movement hazard. Inside the manufacturing workshop, the sealed blue drum released stored energy and turned routine operations into a rapid pressure release event. Verify pressure relief paths, venting arrangements, container condition, and internal pressure status before heating, filling, cleaning, sealing, or handling any closed drum or vessel. At a loading bay, an unsecured folding platform opened over a dark cargo lift void, turning the edge into an open void hazard. Lock the platform before handling loads. Use barriers, edge stops, and verified support around every cargo lift opening before activity continues. Inside an industrial lathe workshop, movement across a rotating spindle path turned a simple repositioning step into high-speed entanglement exposure. Interlocking guards and presence-sensing devices must shield operating zones. Machinery should automatically cut power when protected access boundaries are breached, stopping spindle motion before loose material can enter the rotation path. At a crane assembly site, a suspended crane section suddenly lost support when a lifting line failed during the operation. Keep the suspended load travel path and swing radius fully clear before every lift. Verify rigging capacity, line condition, connection points, and load balance before any suspended section is moved. Add a fuel. In a backyard deck construction area, a misplaced step during the ladder-to-platform transition created an open-edge exposure at the deck edge. Every access transition needs stable support before weight transfer. Confirm ladder position, platform edge protection, landing surface, and footing before moving between levels. On the rural farmyard, a routine cutting task changed instantly when the toolpath aligned with an unstable cutting direction. Secure the workpiece before cutting, maintain stable positioning, direct the blade path away from the support area, and keep the cutting edge controlled throughout the task. At an excavation pit, an excavator bucket used as improvised access suddenly swung, turning the attachment area into an unstable movement path. Use approved access equipment only. Lower the bucket, isolate hydraulics, lock the boom, and keep access away from moving attachments. Inside a foam packaging workshop, material adjustment under a compact press turned routine handling into closing plate and exposure when the machine cycled again. Press clearance is confirmed with isolation, not speed. Material must not be held, aligned, or retrieved inside the press opening, while control power, foot pedals, sensors, or repeat cycle settings remain active. Keep the platen blocked, the cycle stopped, and the start controls secured before any adjustment enters the closing path. Station forecourt, a parked heavy truck unexpectedly began rolling toward active fuel pumps and nearby structures. Secure every parked vehicle with brakes, wheel chocks, and a final stability check before it is left unattended. When uncontrolled vehicle movement begins, keep the travel path clear and rely on safe shutdown or emergency controls. In a steel fabrication bay, a suspended girder broke away from its planned route and dropped into the storage area below. Every lift must account for possible rigging loss, load shift, or support failure. Keep the load travel area clear and verify rigging, balance, and exclusion controls before movement begins. Inside the work facility, the massive stone slab suddenly shifted when its support condition changed during handling. Verify slab stability before handling. Establish exclusion zones around leaning or suspended stone, and use engineered supports and restraints rather than friction or temporary positioning to control the load. In a fabrication yard, a suspended structural section tips during positioning, swinging stored steel weight across the access path before the load settles. Set exclusion lines before rigging moves. Guide steel with tag lines, keep access paths clear, and land sections only on stable blocking. Inside a high-pressure utility area, valve and water system handling turned unstable when stored pressure found a sudden release path. High-pressure utility systems require verified pressure control, protective barriers, and full energy isolation before valve or water system handling begins. Access must remain outside the pressure release path until valve integrity, line condition, and zero energy status are confirmed. At a forging line, a red-hot steel billet was struck for positioning, but the impact landed off-center and the glowing material suddenly rolled free across the work area. Verify hot stock is properly seated and restrained before striking or repositioning. Establish a clear exclusion area along every possible roll path. In a fabrication workshop, a bench grinder wheel failed during a normal grinding pass, sending fragments across the bay. Grinding wheels store rotational energy and require inspection before use. Verify wheel condition, rating, mounting, guards, tool rest clearance, and operating speed before starting the grinder. In a yard, a forklift raises a tall blue bin while the upper opening remains active, turning the load into an unstable tipping path. Lift only empty secured containers. Confirm the load is clear, forks are centered, and the bin is stable before elevation. Inside a factory hall, the ceiling structure gave way overhead, releasing heavy panels and framing into the active aisle. Inspect and secure overhead structures before activity below. Close the area whenever panels, beams, or supports show movement, damage, weak anchoring, or loss of alignment. Inside an outdoor industrial trench, angle grinder sparks entered an unseen vapor-rich area, turning routine cutting into a rapid flash fire hazard. Hot work requires rigorous atmospheric testing before operation. High-temperature sparks can easily ignite unseen flammable vapors or combustible dust. Always secure proper permits. Ensure adequate ventilation and clear all volatile materials from the immediate vicinity to maintain a secure workspace. In a busy market food stall, an energized metal surface became part of an unintended electrical path, triggering an electrical event through the stall area. Electricity follows every available path to ground, especially in crowded, conductive environments. Never operate equipment with damaged wiring, missing grounding, or unverified electrical protection around metal surfaces and moisture. Inside the warehouse, a forklift entered the storage aisle while uncontrolled access developed directly inside the machine's travel path. Separate access routes from forklift operating areas using physical barriers, controlled entry points, designated walkways, and restricted access controls. Mobile equipment zones should never function as uncontrolled access areas. Inside a warehouse loading area, panel unstacking turned unstable when a tall bundle shifted sideways, sending stacked sheets into an uncontrolled collapse path. Panel release must be staged, not forced. Before unstacking, brace the bundle, remove one sheet at a time, and control the lean with racks, straps, wedges, or mechanical handling. A tall panel stack can shift its center of gravity sideways in one motion, turning the entire face into a collapse path. Keep tools, access, and staging space outside the fall line. At a clinic entrance with a full-height glass door, a normal doorway movement escalated into a cascading glass panel failure. Verify that large glass doors are properly supported, aligned, and fitted with safety-rated hardware. Do not continue using doors that show binding, misalignment, loose fittings, or unusual movement. Inside the warehouse, the forklift entered the storage aisle when an unexpected exposure suddenly developed within the machine's travel path. Separate access routes from forklift operating areas using physical barriers, controlled entry points, designated walkways, and restricted access controls. Mobile equipment zones should never be used as uncontrolled access areas. On a roadside storage area beside stacked containers, a drum met flame and trapped vapor triggered a rapid pressure and flame release. Keep ignition sources away from drums. Identify contents, vent safely, bond in ground containers, and open only in controlled, cleared areas. At the rear of a dump trailer, an inspection beneath the raised body became a support loss event. Elevated trailer bodies require verified mechanical support before any inspection beneath or around the raised structure. Use rated blocking, lockout, and secondary support to control movement if the primary lift system fails. Inside the metal foundry, the exposed molten metal vessel sat at the center of operations when activity moved close to the open process area. Establish physical barriers, protected access routes, and controlled work boundaries around open molten metal vessels. Keep all non-essential activity outside the heat, splash, and exposure area surrounding the process. Inside an auto repair shop, heat was applied directly to a used fuel tank when hidden vapors triggered a rapid pressure and flame release. Never weld, cut, or apply open flame to a fuel tank unless it has been professionally cleaned, gas tested, vented, and verified free of flammable vapor. On a storefront sidewalk, unstable footing during a banner adjustment turned the access setup into a collapsing frame and support loss path. Use rated access equipment for elevated adjustments. Secure loose frames, keep the base level, and verify stable footing before any overhead or front-facing work begins. Inside a bedroom, a lift-up storage bed closes over an unnoticed compartment entry, turning hidden storage into a silent entrapment hazard. Keep lift-up storage beds locked open during access. Check the compartment before lowering, and control the panel through the full closing motion. On a rural roadwork lane, a cloudy haze across the roadway weakened forward visibility. Just as traffic approached temporary cones and barriers, visibility decides speed before the steering wheel does. When dust, glare, mist, smoke, or road spray makes the path unclear, the vehicle must slow before entering the work area. Temporary cones and barriers cannot protect a lane if the approach is hidden. Add advance warning, reduce speed, improve sight distance, and pause work when the road ahead looks washed out or unclear. A vehicle needs clear visual distance to identify the lane shift and react. When haze hides the setup, momentum keeps the vehicle moving forward before correction can happen. Slow down when the road view fades. No clear sightline, no normal speed. Inside a residential ladder workspace, an unsecured hand tool slipped from height, turning overhead work into a falling object hazard below. Elevated tasks require strict tool control protocols. Tools must be tethered, secured, or staged away from open edges. Exclusion areas beneath overhead work must remain clear until overhead adjustment is complete and every loose item is controlled. On a scaffold platform at a construction site, a sudden medical emergency turned a routine elevated task into an uncontrolled fall exposure. Plan elevated work with both fall hazards and medical emergencies in mind. Guardrails, personal fall arrest systems, and rapid rescue procedures should remain in place because loss of awareness or sudden incapacitation can instantly remove the ability to self-protect. At a tire service area, an inflated truck tire assembly suddenly released stored pressure energy, driving air force and loose components outward from the assembly. Handle every inflated tire as a pressurized energy source. Use inflation cages, remote airlines, slow pressure control, and a restricted clearance boundary around the assembly during inflation and inspection. At a paper mill production line, tangled rolls of paper brought clearing work too close to active rotating machinery. Lock out and isolate paper machines before removing wrapped paper or clearing jams. Keep clearing and cleaning tasks outside rotating equipment until zero motion is verified. Inside a coil processing line, a steel coil broke free from its station position and rolled through the line in seconds. Set exclusion boundaries around coil transfer loading and positioning operations. Keep access outside the coil travel path until movement has fully stopped and restraint systems are verified. Steel coils contain enormous mass and momentum. If positioning equipment loses control, a restraint disengages, or the coil shifts off its intended support path, gravity and rotational energy can rapidly convert the coil into an uncontrolled moving load. A rolling coil can cross a work area with very little warning. Respect coil travel paths, maintain separation distance, and verify restraints before access resumes. Inside a machine shop, loose fabric entered the rotating path of a lathe and moved toward the spinning equipment almost immediately. Keep loose fabric, sleeves, rags, jewelry, and unsecured items completely outside rotating machinery paths. Use fitted workwear, guarding, and verified zero motion before working near exposed rotation. On a tree-lined city sidewalk, an ordinary step onto what looked like a solid manhole cover suddenly revealed an unsecured opening beneath. Before stepping onto utility covers, verify they are properly seated, secured, and undamaged, especially in areas with maintenance activity or aging infrastructure. Manhole covers rely on correct positioning and support around the rim. If a cover is shifted, unsecured, or partially supported, applied load can cause it to rotate, tip, or drop into the opening. A cover that looks secure may not be secure. Check walking surfaces carefully and report loose utility covers immediately. In a metal stamping workshop, a routine feed into a power press turned hazardous when the machine cycle started while access remained inside the operating area. Never place any access point inside an active press opening. Use guarding, two-hand controls, light curtains, or approved feeding tools to keep all contact points outside the machine's travel path. At a fuel pump, a vehicle sits beside active fuel vapor as a lit cigarette turns routine refueling into a fast-spreading flash fire at the nozzle area. Keep ignition sources away from fuel transfer. Extinguish cigarettes, shut pumps, secure the nozzle, control nearby vapor, and clear the forecourt before refueling continues. Gasoline vapor spreads low around tanks, caps, and fuel openings during active filling, especially when air movement carries it across the pump area. A small flame, spark, or hot ash can ignite the vapor-air mix and push heat outward in seconds. Refueling needs vapor control and ignition discipline. No flame, no spark, no shortcut near fuel. At a loading bay, a forklift lifted loose folded panels with unstable extra weight on the bundle, turning the load into a tipping ramp. Forklifts must move secured material only, lower, strap, center, and stabilize loose panels before movement and remove any extra weight that can shift the load balance. Along an active highway, a speeding van drifted toward the tow truck ramp, turning roadside recovery into a sudden lane intrusion hazard within seconds. Recovery loading starts with a protected approach, not the winch. Set advance warning, taper cones, lane buffer, and clear ramp side positioning before vehicle movement onto the bed begins. Angle the tow truck for shielding when safe, and pause loading if approaching traffic does not slow or shift away. At highway speed, lane drift can close distance faster than roadside recovery controls can adjust. A ramp, shoulder, and open lane can become one shared travel path instantly. Protect the recovery area first. No traffic buffer, no loading. At an excavation site, high-pressure water maintenance turned unstable when the line released energy into the work area without warning. High-pressure equipment requires controlled distance, secured valves, and verified energy isolation before work begins. Lockout, depressurization, and line condition checks must be completed before access enters the release path. At a building construction site, an elevated work area with exposed edges turned unstable when footing support changed near the open edge. Maintain secure walking surfaces, guardrails, and fall arrest systems wherever edge exposure exists. Inspect work platforms continuously for slip, trip, and stability hazards. An elevated surface provides little margin for error when balance is disrupted. Once support is lost near an unprotected edge, gravity immediately drives movement toward the lower level. The hazard began with lost footing and exposed edges. Control the walking surface and edge protection before elevation work starts. In a fabrication workshop, a compressed gas cylinder lost stability and released stored gas pressure outward from the cylinder assembly. Secure every gas cylinder upright with chains, brackets, or approved restraints. Protect cylinders from impact, dragging, contact, and unintended movement whenever they are stored, transported, or connected for use. At a construction yard, a suspended precast concrete panel dropped from the lifting system and entered the drop zone below. Maintain a strict clear area beneath suspended loads. Access below the load must remain closed until lifting gear, rigging connections, and load stability are fully verified. A suspended load stores gravitational potential energy. If a lifting connection, rigging component, or load restraint fails, that energy is instantly released and the load accelerates downward with little or no warning. A suspended load is never safe simply because it is off the ground. Keep every access path clear beneath the load and verify the lift before movement begins. Inside an underground transport tunnel, an auxiliary transportation system accelerated beyond normal control. Loss of normal control is the first warning sign. Stop the operation, isolate the system, and use emergency procedures before movement continues through the tunnel. At an industrial work area, hot work on a steel drum suddenly released stored energy from inside the container. Isolate, clean, vent, and test drums, tanks, and containers before applying heat. Maintain controls that prevent flammable vapor buildup or internal pressure during hot work. Residual vapors, trapped gases, or pressure can remain inside containers long after normal operations have ended. When heat is applied, temperature and pressure can increase rapidly, creating conditions for ignition, expansion, or sudden energy release. Hidden energy can remain inside a container long after it appears empty. Control the atmosphere before applying heat. On top of a large steel tank during a welding task, unstable footing suddenly turned the elevated surface into an open-edge exposure. Use properly anchored fall protection systems for all elevated work. Maintain secure access, stable working surfaces, and verified anchor points, lifelines, and connection systems before work begins. At a curbside collection point, the garbage truck's hydraulic arm drags the trash can and sidewalk bench together, turning pickup into a sweeping obstruction hazard. Keep collection areas clear of benches, loose bins, signs, and sidewalk fixtures. Set separation before lift cycles. Inspect nearby objects and stop the arm at any snag. The hydraulic arm applies strong pulling force through the bin. Once the trash can catches the bench, that force transfers into the fixture, dragging both objects along the sweep arc and multiplying movement across the curb edge. Automated collection needs clear space around every bin. Check, separate, secure, then cycle the arm. Inside an active wash bay, a live rotating brush caught loose material, turning a routine check into uncontrolled wraparound motion near the machine frame. Pause and isolate wash brushes before access. Lock out rotation, secure loose material, straps, and tools, and keep inspection outside the brush. Sweep path. Inside a home environment, a live charging cable entered a wet contact path, turning everyday electronics into an electrical exposure hazard. Active charging cables must stay away from wet or conductive contact paths. Moisture lowers electrical resistance, and any powered connector contacting liquid can create an immediate electrical exposure point. A live charging cable contacting moisture can complete an unintended circuit through a low-resistance path. Electrical energy can transfer through the liquid contact point, creating a sudden discharge outside the intended insulated route. Treat all plugged-in chargers as active hardware. Keep cables away from moisture and conductive surfaces. Inside a heavy foundry, an overhead crane carrying molten metal lost stability, turning the production floor into a thermal spill path. Industrial facility design must include automated spill containment, protected transfer routes, and remote emergency shutdown systems. Thermal material movement must stay separated from access paths during crane travel, ladle transfer, and structural stability events. In a deep utility trench, pipe installation was underway when the excavation wall suddenly gave way, sending a large soil into the confined work area without warning. Protect excavations with shoring, trench boxes, or properly sloped walls before entry. Inspect soil conditions throughout the shift, especially after weather changes, vibration, or nearby equipment activity. Excavation walls rely on soil strength and pressure balance to remain stable. When soil becomes overloaded, saturated, disturbed, or unsupported, that balance can fail rapidly, releasing large amounts of material into the trench. Stable-looking soil can fail with little or no visible warning. Protect, inspect, and stabilize every trench before work begins below grade. At a textile production machine, material handling near a rotating roller suddenly turned into an uncontrolled draw-in hazard. Stop, isolate, and lock out roller equipment before clearing material, adjusting fabric, or reaching near rotating sections. Keep hands, tools, and loose clothing outside all nip points. At a roadside construction area, gas ignition transformed a routine work zone into a powerful pressure event. Never begin excavation, cutting, or ground-disturbing work until underground utilities and potential gas sources have been identified, isolated, and verified safe. Flammable gas can accumulate in confined soil voids, trenches, or utility spaces without obvious warning signs. When an ignition source is introduced, rapid expansion creates a pressure wave capable of ejecting debris, equipment, and loose materials outward. Hidden energy beneath the surface can become active without warning. Verify underground services before work begins and treat every excavation as a potential utility exposure. Inside a residential kitchen, a leaking gas cylinder hose changed an ordinary appliance startup into a pressure and fire event within seconds. Never operate electrical switches, appliances, or ignition sources when a gas leak is suspected. Isolate the gas supply, ventilate the area, and eliminate ignition sources before re-entering the space. At a fence construction site, a damaged ladder shifted without warning while a fastening task was underway at height. Never use a ladder with damaged rails, loose components, or stability issues. Inspect access equipment before use and secure it on firm, level ground. A ladder depends on structural integrity and stable contact points to distribute load safely. When a damaged section fails or the ladder loses stability, the center of gravity can move outside the support base, leading to sudden uncontrolled movement. A quick ladder inspection can prevent an elevated access hazard. Use sound equipment, secure the setup, and replace damaged ladders immediately. At a waste transfer station, a garbage truck reversed toward a dumping bay when the edge beneath it suddenly gave way. Verify wheel stop position, bay alignment, and surface condition before unloading. Never rely solely on visual judgment when operating near a tipping edge or discharge pit. At a gravel yard, a raised dump body backs near loose aggregate, squeezing rear clearance between the tailgate, ground, and nearby truck movement. Keep dump body rear areas clear during backing, dumping, or lowering. Set exclusion lines, verify rear clearance, use a spotter, and stop movement near loose ground, blind corners, or shifting piles. A raised dump body shifts weight high and changes the rear swing geometry. On uneven gravel, small vehicle movement can quickly turn the tailgate area into a pinch and sweep hazard with limited clearance. Dump trucks need clear rear space before motion. Raise, lower, and back only with verified clearance. At a roadside construction frontage, an excavator bucket crossed the sidewalk side boundary, pushing the access path toward an open pit without rigid protection. Separate public access from active digging. Use rigid barricades, spotters, marked swing limits, visible stop lines, and a stopped bucket before sidewalk side movement continues. Inside an auto detail shop, work beneath a raised hood turned unstable when the support system lost control of the panel. Raised hood work requires verified lift support condition before access enters the panel path. A secondary mechanical prop or locking support must hold the panel independently if the primary struts lose force. Hydraulic hood struts can lose counterforce against the panel's downward mass. Gravity converts raised height into downward motion, driving the hood frame toward the grille structure unless a secondary prop controls the drop path. Verify primary supports before raised panel service. Backup props keep the panel path controlled during support loss. At a scrapyard incline, a heavy delivery truck lost holding control, turning the slope into an uncontrolled rollback path. Heavy vehicles on slopes require wheel chocks, parking brakes, and verified holding control before unloading begins. The rollback path must remain clear, and the vehicle must be secured before cargo movement continues. At a truck loading operation, a massive steel beam was being positioned when the crane rigging suddenly failed, turning the suspended load into an uncontrolled moving hazard. Inspect slings, wire ropes, hooks, and connection points before every lift. Keep the suspended load travel path and swing radius fully clear, with marked lift path clearance maintained throughout the operation. Lifting systems transfer the entire load through rigging components under high tension. If a sling, wire rope, or connection point fails, the stored energy is released instantly, causing sudden load shift, drop, or swing. Rigging failures develop faster than reactions can respond. Verify, lift integrity, and keep every load path completely clear. At a storefront work area, a long extension ladder was resting through a mobile scaffold when a sudden scaffold roll turned the ladder into a swinging overhead hazard. Secure ladders independently and never use scaffolding as a support point. Lock scaffold wheels, verify stability, and eliminate unintended movement before climbing or positioning access equipment. Along a decorative pool edge, maintenance work became an electrical emergency when a hidden, energized path reached both the water and nearby metal structures. Before working around pools, fountains, or water features, isolate electrical equipment, verify zero energy, and test the area for stray voltage. Never assume water and surrounding metal are safe to touch. When an electrical fault energizes water, current can spread through conductive paths, including metal frames, wet surfaces, and grounded structures. Contact points around the water feature can remain energized until power is isolated and verified. Electrical hazards around water are often invisible until contact occurs. De-energize, test, and verify every nearby circuit before entering or working around water features. In a production area filled with material feed lines, routine machine work became a feed roller draw-in hazard. Never adjust, clear, guide, or reposition material near active feed rollers unless motion is stopped, isolated, and verified at zero energy. Inside the busy storefront, the ladder suddenly shifted without warning and set a chain reaction in motion within seconds. Secure ladders against movement before climbing, establish stable footing at the base and top contact points, and use proper ladder control measures rather than relying on temporary support. A leaning ladder depends on friction at the base and stable support at the top to remain in equilibrium. When the base slides or the ladder angle changes, the support forces shift rapidly and the ladder can rotate out of position. Ladder safety starts before the first step off the ground. Secure the ladder, verify footing, and keep the work area clear of secondary exposure paths. On the neighborhood street, the parked delivery van began reversing while a hidden exposure remained completely outside the driver's view. Check blind spots, rear travel paths, mirrors, cameras, and surrounding conditions before reversing, and use spotters or additional controls whenever visibility is restricted or obstructed. A wet roadside, an unstable vehicle tumbled across the open lane and broke into the travel path. Roadside access must stay clear until all vehicle movement has fully stopped. Wet pavement, rolling motion, and shifting direction can change the travel path without warning, so distance and separation must come before crossing. A tumbling vehicle carries momentum in shifting directions, and every rotation can change its path. Wet pavement reduces friction, making each slide or bounce harder to predict. Clear the rolling path first. No stable direction, no safe crossing. At an urban intersection, a flatbed truck braked hard, and the unsecured cargo kept moving with full forward momentum. Secure every load for sudden braking, not just normal travel. Heavy cargo must be locked down with rated restraints, proper blocking, and verified tension before entering traffic. A flatbed load can look stable at low speed, but one emergency stop can turn it into a sliding mass. Inside a pipe fabrication bay, overhead crane hardware released from above, turning pipe handling below into an uncontrolled drop path within seconds. Overhead work starts with exclusion below the crane. Hooks, blocks, fasteners, lifting attachments, and upper crane components must be inspected before material movement through the bay. Keep the floor path clear beneath suspended or elevated equipment, and stop the lift if any upper component shows looseness, sway, or abnormal movement. The space under crane hardware is not an access area during active handling. Anything elevated carries stored gravitational energy. Once support fails, the object accelerates downward into the floor path with almost no delay. Clear the area below the crane. No overhead security, no floor access. At a congested concrete pour area, a reversing mixer truck narrowed the work lane as rear blind spots overlapped the backing path. Mixer truck backing needs a planned route, fixed separation lines, confirmed guide signals, and cleared staging before movement begins. Tight access, material placement, and rear blind spots must be managed as one controlled backing hazard, not separate issues. On a flatbed truck traveling along a roadway, a steel coil shifted across the trailer deck, and the unsecured load suddenly broke free. Secure steel coils with engineered restraints, chocks, and proper tie-down systems. Verify load stability before departure and after significant changes in speed, direction, or road conditions. A steel coil stores enormous momentum due to its mass and cylindrical shape. When restraints are inadequate or forces exceed their capacity, the coil can begin rolling, allowing inertia and gravity to rapidly increase its movement. Heavy loads do not need much movement to become uncontrollable. Restrain every coil as if the entire journey depends on it. At a trailer loading area, hydraulic loading ramps were raised for transport when a chain adjustment placed stored hydraulic energy and suspended equipment on the same path. Never position yourself beneath, beside, or within the travel path of raised ramps. Secure ramps with mechanical locks or secondary supports before performing adjustments, inspections, or chain work. At a loading platform, a large bundled load shifted during handling and made the transfer area an active movement hazard. Large bundled loads require clear exclusion boundaries before pushing, guiding, or receiving begins. Keep fixed structures, transfer points, and load travel areas separated until movement is fully controlled. Large suspended or supported loads can continue moving after the initial force changes. A small shift in balance, friction, or support can redirect the load path and rapidly reduce clearance around fixed structures. Heavy loads can change direction faster than people can react. Stay outside the load path, maintain clear escape routes, and control the movement before approaching the transfer area. On a crowded construction roadway, a suspended load drifted toward the same travel route as a moving forklift, creating a rapidly narrowing clearance point. Multiple moving systems require wider separation, not closer coordination. Keep forklift routes, suspended load paths, and access areas divided so one unexpected movement cannot create a closing clearance hazard. Inside the workshop, the suspended cylinder suddenly began rotating as lifting operations were underway nearby. Establish exclusion zones before lifting begins. Keep all access routes outside load travel and rotation paths, and approach only after the suspended load is fully stabilized and secured. Suspended loads can rotate, swing, or shift whenever the center of gravity changes or lifting forces become uneven. A small movement at the rigging or lifting point can create a much larger movement at the load itself due to its size and mass. Suspended loads can continue moving even after lifting stops. Maintain clearance until the load is fully under control. In the tire service area, compressed air was being introduced into the large tire assembly when stored pressure suddenly released. Use approved inflation equipment, restraint systems, and remote air connections during tire inflation, and keep all access routes outside the sidewall and potential release paths before pressurization begins. At a construction facade lift, a suspended metal panel hung over the work area until a support line was severed and the load released. Keep every cutting task separated from live rigging lines. A suspended panel depends on each rope staying protected, visible, and clear of blades, sharp edges, and uncontrolled contact. When one support is severed, the load path changes instantly. Gravity pulls the panel down while the remaining rigging redirects force into a fast swing. A lifted panel is only as safe as the line holding it. Separate cutting from rigging, protect every rope, and stop work when lines enter the blade path. Inside a steel plant casting line, molten metal released from the machine and moved outside its controlled discharge path. Keep the discharge path guarded, cleared, and monitored whenever molten material is moving. Any flash, spray, or irregular flow must trigger an immediate stop before the metal leaves its controlled channel. At a construction loading area, excavator swing movement overlapped with truck bed access, turning material handling into bucket path exposure. Excavator loading requires a controlled swing perimeter before any truck bed access begins. The bucket path, counterweight path, and material drop area must remain clear until machine movement stops and the loading sequence is secured. During a swing cycle, the excavator bucket follows a fixed arc over the truck bed. Any access point inside that arc becomes part of the machine's movement path, especially when the bucket descends during material placement. Clear the loading path before machine movement. No controlled perimeter, no truck bed access. At a demolition site, pulling lines loaded an unsupported brick wall, turning tear-down work into a fast-moving collapse path. Structural tear-down must follow the stability of the wall, not the speed of the pull. Drop areas must extend beyond the wall height, and tension lines must be routed so collapse movement stays inside a controlled demolition perimeter. In a bakery mixing area, an energized rotating mixer created a hazard when control access crossed the machine's active rotation path. Place emergency stops and control switches in accessible locations that do not require reaching across moving equipment. Shut down and isolate mixers before reaching behind, over, or around rotating machinery. Rotating mixers create continuous draw-in hazards around exposed moving components. When clothing enters the rotation path, friction and rotational force can rapidly pull the fabric further into the moving mechanism. Accessing controls should never require crossing a machine's movement path. Design safe access, isolate equipment, and keep loose clothing clear of rotating machinery. In a wastewater treatment area, a screw conveyor was switched on for cleaning, and the rotating auger immediately turned the equipment itself into the hazard path. Before clearing debris or performing maintenance, lock out and isolate screw conveyors completely. Never stand on rotating equipment and use designated access platforms for all cleaning tasks. Along an excavation trench, a shovel struck a hidden energized line, changing a routine digging task into an invisible electrical hazard. Verify the location and status of underground utilities before any excavation begins. Do not dig until buried electrical services have been identified, marked, isolated, or protected. Electric current seeks the easiest path to ground when an energized conductor is contacted. Metal tools, moist soil, and conductive surfaces can rapidly spread electrical energy beyond the point of contact. What cannot be seen underground can still carry dangerous energy. Locate, mark, and control buried utilities before breaking ground. At a roadside utility installation, a newly raised pole moves toward energized overhead lines, and the risk changes immediately. Verify line clearance before every lift, establish a no-entry boundary around the work area, and stop the operation immediately if any part of the load, boom, or pole approaches energized conductors. In the machine shop, the suspended metal load suddenly shifted off balance and turned the controlled lift into an uncontrolled energy release within seconds. Confirm center of gravity, sling angles, attachment points, and load stability before lifting. Keep workstations, access routes, and tool positions outside swing or drop paths. When the load center of gravity moved outside the rigging support points, rotational force began acting through the suspended metal mass. Even a small imbalance can redirect stored potential energy into sudden swing, tilt, or downward movement. A suspended load stays unstable until fully controlled. Plan the lift and clear the movement path. At the loading dock, a box truck reversed toward the building entrance while an access area remained hidden from the driver's view. Control access to blind spot areas during reversing operations. Maintain clear separation from active travel paths and use spotters, cameras, or other visibility controls whenever rear visibility is restricted. Inside a fabrication workshop, a bench grinder threw heavy sparks as the workpiece overheated, sending dense discharge across the grinding area. Use the correct wheel, light pressure, and steady contact for every grinding task. Keep extraction running, guards positioned, and the spark path clear before heat and dust build beyond control. Excess pressure turns friction into rapid heat, breaking material into sparks, dust, and vapor. Without airflow control, that hot discharge can expand outward and reduce visibility across the work area. Inside a coil storage bay, a stacked pallet of unsecured metal coils loses stability and drops into the open aisle path. Keep stacked coils restrained before any nearby handling begins. Banding, chocks, cradles, pallet integrity, and spacing must control every layer before the stack is approached or moved. At a scaffolded facade, a large panel lifted beside a boom platform shifted beyond its restraint, turning elevation work into a sudden load swing hazard. Panel installation from a boom lift requires rated attachment points, secondary retention, and controlled positioning before the load leaves its stable support. Any wide, flat material must be secured against sliding, tilting, or wind-driven movement during elevation and alignment. Large panels act like sails, catching air and increasing side force as height rises. Once the center of mass moves past the support point, gravity and momentum can move the panel beyond controlled alignment. Secure the panel before elevation begins. Use rated restraint, tagline control, and verified support through the full lift. At a fuel station work area, manual fuel transfer near a storage tank released vapor into an ignition-sensitive environment. Fuel transfer areas require strict ignition source control, grounding, bonding, vapor ventilation, and sealed container handling. Flammable liquids must stay separated from sparks, open heat, static discharge, and active machinery components during transfer. In a chemical transfer area, flammable liquid freefalls into a plastic tote as static energy builds near open containers. Bond and ground every transfer system before flammable liquid moves. Free-falling liquid plastic totes, open drums, and vapor-rich air can create an ignition path when static charge has no safe route to drain. As liquid falls through air and splashes into a non-conductive tote, charge separates and accumulates instead of draining away. Once the voltage becomes high enough, a static arc can create an ignition event at the fill point. Static is invisible until the transfer path becomes energized. Ground the system, control the flow, and keep vapor away from ignition sources. In a textile production area, exposed rollers kept turning as adjustment access moved too close to the active nip path. Keep adjustment access outside energized roller paths. Stop the machine, isolate rotation, and verify zero movement before any fabric adjustment, clearing task, or setup change near the nip point. In a steel coil transport lane, a moving coil carrier load shifted sideways, changing a normal travel route into a closing clearance hazard. Set a clear standoff distance from moving coil carriers and oversized loads. Keep access outside any area where load swing, load shift, or overhang movement could enter the clearance envelope. Large steel coils carry significant inertia, and even small lateral movements can create powerful side sweep forces. As equipment turns, accelerates, or encounters uneven surfaces, the load's center of mass can shift beyond its expected travel envelope. The danger is not only in front of a moving load, but also beside it. Respect the full movement path of transported materials and stay outside the load's potential sweep area. In a truck loading bay, a hanging galvanized steel bundle swung away from the trailer, creating a swing hazard across the unloading area. The load path includes every space between the starting point and final placement. Establish exclusion areas around possible swing directions before lifting, lowering, or repositioning begins. Beside the building wall, an attempt to clear a bee nest with an open flame suddenly changed direction when burning material returned from above. Use approved pest control methods for bee and insect nests. Keep ignition sources away from overhead work areas and establish clear separation from any potential drop or fire path. Objects positioned overhead can change direction quickly when support conditions, balance, or attachment points are altered. Once burning material detached from the pole, gravity redirected its movement along the most direct path toward the area below. Overhead, work can create both fire and falling object hazards at the same time. Use approved methods and control the drop zone before starting. Inside the auto repair shop, the pickup truck suddenly rolled forward and closed the available clearance between the vehicle and the wall. Secure vehicles against unintended movement before service begins. Confirm parking and transmission controls are properly set. And keep all work activities outside narrowing of vehicle travel paths and fixed object clearance spaces. Inside a processing area, a routine fix happens near a commercial machine as exposed rotation hooks loose material inward. Isolate the machine before any adjustment near the feed drum, shaft, belt, or rotating mouth. A routine fix becomes uncontrolled when exposed rotation remains active and loose material enters the pulling path. Rotating parts create grip through friction and hooking force. Once material catches, the machine keeps winding it inward until rotation is stopped and stored energy is controlled. Routine fixes still need zero motion. Stop power, verify isolation, clear the feed path, and restart only after guarding is restored. On a sloped service road beside a parked dump truck, loose concrete blocks near the retaining edge shift, then drop into the active travel path. Keep heavy blocks restrained away from ramps, edges, and vehicle paths. Use chocks, barriers, stack height limits, and exclusion marking so gravity cannot turn loose masonry into a falling load. Inside a busy warehouse, overloaded pallet racking began transferring force across connected frames, turning storage aisles into a domino failure hazard. Maintaining stable warehouse storage structures requires absolute compliance with maximum weight capacities and secure rack locking systems. Routine technical audits ensure that every single frame remains perfectly straight and completely undamaged. An initial rack failure shifts load into adjoining frames and overloads their vertical supports. Once connected frames begin sharing unexpected force, the failure can travel across the aisle in a domino sequence. Respect rack load limits and inspect frame locks. One overloaded bay can transfer force across the whole storage line. At a street excavation site, power cutter sparks met the wrong liquid, turning routine cutting support into a sudden flash fire hazard. Fuel containers must stay sealed, grounded, and separated from spark-producing tools or active machinery. Flash fire prevention depends on controlled storage, clean transfer methods, ventilation, and a clear buffer between fuel vapor and ignition point. In a steel mill bay, a crane lifted molten steel pan, tipped and redirected liquid metal across the floor path. Move a ladle only when the pan is stable, centered, and fully clear. Verify rigging balance, crane control, cart clearance, support alignment, and open floor clearance before the molten load moves. Molten steel carries extreme heat and mass, so even a small tilt can shift the load violently. Once the pan loses balance, gravity drives the liquid metal outward in an uncontrolled pour. A molten load must stay balanced before it moves. Stabilize, clear the path, then lift. In a workshop test area, access behind a running lathe crossed an exposed shaft while the rotating center line remained active. Retrieve anything behind a lathe only after shutdown, full stop, and controlled isolation. Set a clear access path so no movement crosses the exposed shaft or rotating center line. Inside a metal recycling facility, a shortcut along the edge of a compactor created open edge exposure in seconds. Compactor walls and loading edges are not access platforms. Use designated platforms, tools, or material placement methods that keep access outside the processing equipment boundary. A narrow edge dramatically reduces stability and leaves little margin for recovery when balance shifts unexpectedly. Smooth metal surfaces, loose debris, and the movement of heavy scrap can quickly create an uncontrolled fall path into processing equipment. The safest place around a compactor is outside the equipment boundary. Stable footing and proper access methods prevent a routine task from becoming an emergency. On a rooftop demolition site, a structural section lost support beneath the work zone, turning solid footing into an open void exposure within seconds. Verify load-bearing capacity before access onto partially demolished structures. Do not continue work where support members, walls, or floor sections are being removed unless the remaining structure has been assessed and secured. On the elevated scaffold inside the construction project, stability was suddenly lost near the unprotected edge and movement entered the open floor path. Install continuous edge protection, maintain secure working surfaces, and use properly anchored fall protection systems whenever elevated work areas contain open sides, floor openings, or exposed edges. Elevated work surfaces provide a limited support area for maintaining balance and stability. Once the center of gravity moves beyond the available support surface, gravity rapidly increases movement toward the open edge. Fall protection must be in place before elevated work begins. Protect the edge, secure the surface, and control the exposure path. On the city street, during garbage collection, the rear loading area was active when an approaching truck suddenly entered the collection route. Protect collection routes with traffic control measures, buffer zones, warning devices, and controlled access, and keep active loading areas separated from moving traffic throughout the operation. In a tight service side parking area, a yellow truck sat beside loose cables before unsecured braking turned still metal into motion. A parked vehicle is controlled only when the parking brake is set, the transmission secured, and wheel movement blocked when needed. Any stop on a slope, slick surface, or confined work area must be managed as stored rolling energy, not a pause. Once the brake is missed, gravity and vehicle mass can overcome tire friction, allowing the truck to creep with force. In a narrow gap, even low-speed movement can close clearance quickly. Set the brake before leaving the cab. Secure the wheels before vehicle movement controls the path. On a rural road, an overloaded cargo truck carries stacked sacks beyond the bed height. Then the rear suspension dips and the load begins shifting. Set load limits before departure, not after movement starts. Cargo height, axle rating, tire condition, restraints, and route clearance must match the truck's capacity, with excess weight removed before travel. Inside a chemical processing plant, a pressurized vessel check began before full release, turning the hatch area into an energy release path. High-pressure vessels require full lockout, verified depressurization, and temperature control before hatch or valve access begins. Access must remain outside the release path until gauges, vents, seals, and isolation points confirm zero stored energy. If a vessel remains pressurized, internal force can overcome the hatch seal when the closure is loosened. Stored steam, liquid, or chemical energy then exits through the opened path, expanding the release area around the vessel. Confirm zero pressure before any vessel check. Stored energy must be released before the hatch path opens. At a semi-enclosed food stall, LPG refilling beside active cooking heat turned fuel transfer into a sudden vapor ignition hazard. Refilling combustible fuel containers must exclusively occur in isolated, highly ventilated external zones completely separated from open flames. Establishing rigid procedural barriers for fuel delivery secures the immediate environment from undetected vapor accumulation. In an oil service bay, a misset drain valve sent pressurized oil backward, spreading fluid across walls, buckets, floor surfaces, and tools. Verify the directional valve position before opening any drain flow. Route oil into the correct receiving path. Relieve stored pressure, secure splash containment, and confirm the system is clear before the drain process begins. A mispositioned valve can send oil into a restricted or pressurized path instead of the drain route. Pressure then drives fluid backward through the setup, creating a sudden, uncontrolled, room-wide release. Valve position controls the entire drain path. Verify, relieve pressure, contain splash, then drain. In a restaurant ceiling workspace, a wire cutter contacts a live conductor, and an arc flash erupts across the fixture opening. De-energize and verify absence of voltage before cutting any conductor. Lock out the circuit, test with a rated meter, and keep the work area controlled against arc flash energy. Along a farm boundary line, a post-driving machine struck buried gas infrastructure, releasing pressurized gas and displacing soil. Pressurized gas pipelines store large amounts of energy. When a buried line is breached, rapid gas release can displace soil and loose material through the weakest available path. Pressurized gas pipelines store large amounts of energy. When a buried line is breached, rapid gas release can displace soil, create a blast effect, and turn debris into high-speed projectiles. What lies below the surface can be more dangerous than what's visible above it. Locate, mark, and protect underground utilities before every excavation or post-driving task. At a parcel sorting conveyor, loose material crossed into a moving transfer point, and the line drew it into the feed path. Keep tools, loose material, and access points outside conveyor nip points and transfer areas. Never clear, guide, or reach across moving equipment until motion is stopped and isolated. Inside the steel processing facility, the suspended coil was being moved above stacked coils lining the storage area below. Establish exclusion zones between suspended coils and stored material, secure every stack against shifting or rolling, and keep all access routes outside potential movement paths during lifting operations. Steel coils carry enormous stored energy because of their mass and round shape. A small shift in support, balance, or contact point can transfer that energy into rolling movement across the storage area. Coils can move before they look unstable. Secure the stack and clear the movement path. In the maintenance area, the hammer slipped off its intended target and instantly changed direction along an uncontrolled path. Maintain clear positioning around impact work. Keep contact points outside potential deflection and rebound paths, and align striking tools, wedges, punches, and workpieces before force is applied. In an unfinished concrete frame, a carried plank shifted off balance at the open edge, turning one step into open edge exposure. Loose planks at height must be controlled before movement begins. Stable footing, guarded edges, secured material, and a clear travel path are required before long boards are carried near open sides. The plank's center of gravity changed as it moved, creating torque against the narrow support area. Secure the material before moving it. Guard the edge before balance depends on it. At a loading dock flatbed, a tie-down strap is thrown across stacked pallets before the landing side is cleared. Use a call and response rule before tossing straps, hooks, tools, or loose hardware over any trailer load. The receiving side, walkway, dock edge, and blind corner must be confirmed clear before anything moves through the air. On a busy urban street, an unanchored metal barricade shifted into the travel lane, turning normal traffic into a sudden obstruction hazard. Temporary barricades must be anchored, weighted, or moved fully outside active traffic lanes. Wind, vibration, or vehicle turbulence can shift unanchored metal into the travel path, turning a small placement error into a roadway obstruction. A freestanding barricade has limited resistance against lateral force. Once its base shifts, momentum and roadway vibration can carry the frame into the lane before approaching traffic can adjust. Anchor temporary barriers before traffic flows. No secure base, no roadway placement. At an active construction site, front-end loader movement near fresh masonry turned material delivery into a structural support failure hazard. Heavy machinery must maintain strict clearance from fresh masonry, temporary structures, and active building edges. Spotting, speed control, and communication signals are required whenever loader movement occurs near unsupported or newly placed wall sections. In a construction staging area below an upper work level, unsecured timber released from height and spread falling material across the open yard. Secure stacked timber with proper bracing, restraints, edge protection, and controlled storage before activity continues below. Keep the fall path barricaded whenever loose boards are staged overhead, near open edges, or exposed to shifting movement. Loose timber gains speed quickly once support is lost. Multiple boards falling together spread impact energy across a wider area than one dropped object. Overhead, timber can turn into falling material fast. Stack, secure, barricade, then work below. On a residential pickup route, a burst hydraulic line released fluid toward a hot exhaust surface and created a sudden ignition flare. Watch hydraulic movement during every lift cycle. Keep pressure lines inspected, routed, and shielded away from exhaust heat so any leak cannot spray directly into an ignition source. Inside a steel coil processing line, a suspended coil broke free from its planned route and converted stored energy into motion. Heavy loads often appear stable right up until the moment balance changes. Maintaining distance is less about current conditions and more about respecting how quickly those conditions can reverse. Large steel coils contain enormous mass, and even a small shift in balance can generate significant momentum. When lifting forces, restraints, or positioning become unstable, the load can swing, drop, rotate, or travel far beyond its expected path. A suspended coil does not need to move far to create a severe load movement hazard. Keep the load path clear, verify rigging integrity, and maintain exclusion controls until the coil is fully secured. On the exterior face of a high-rise building, a banner installation became an open-edge height exposure. Establish continuous fall protection before any work begins near a roof edge, facade edge, or suspended access point. Do not rely on balance, reach distance, or temporary positioning as a substitute for a secured system. Outside the building loading area, an elevated material transfer turned into a falling object event when the load released into the receiving area below. Use controlled lowering methods, lifting devices, ropes, or approved transfer systems for elevated material handling. Keep receiving areas clear until the load is fully controlled. A falling object accelerates under gravity, continuously increasing its speed and momentum as it travels downward. Even a relatively small item can generate forces far greater than its static weight once it enters a free fall path. Gravity increases force with every foot of travel. Control the transfer and protect the drop path. On the narrow roadway, the loaded forklift entered a turn and suddenly crossed beyond its stability limit, sending the entire machine into an uncontrolled rollover. Reduce speed before turning. Keep loads as low as practical during travel, and account for load weight, center of gravity, surface conditions, and turning radius throughout forklift operations. Inside a bulk material processing bay, hot work beside the hopper combines poor footing and exposed framing into a sudden loss of support hazard. Secure access before any hot work begins near hopper frames, ladders, cables, or uneven platforms. Stable footing, fall prevention, clear lower areas, and a controlled spark path must be verified before cutting or repair starts. Poor footing reduces friction and balance control, especially near heat, cables, dust, and narrow steel edges. Once support shifts, gravity can move the path beyond controlled footing. Hot work needs stable access before ignition. Control footing, clear clutter, shield sparks, and stop the task when balance or platform support changes. At a construction yard, a mini excavator climbs onto higher ground as its rear frame clips a steel I-beam hanging on the wall. Check rear clearance before driving near walls, stored steel, or raised ground. Changes in slope can lift the back of the machine into overhead or side-mounted materials that were clear on level ground. On a rural roadside recovery, the crane wire rope took the semi-truck's full weight, turning the lift into a sudden line overload hazard. Recovery lifting must begin with verified load weight, crane capacity, rigging rating, and line angle before tension is applied. A stucker-loaded semi-truck can exceed the crane's safe working limit fast, especially when the pull changes from recovery assistance to a full vertical lift. Keep the lift path and recoil path cleared until the load is secured. When the truck's resistance exceeds the wire rope's rated strength, tension spikes through the line. Once that limit is exceeded, the line can part, and stored energy travels rapidly along the rope's release path. Calculate the load before tension. Match the crane, rigging, and recovery method to the real weight. At a loading dock, a heavy pallet moved onto an elevated liftgate, turning unloading into edge control and weight shift exposure. Elevated liftgate unloading requires verified platform capacity, stable center of gravity, and controlled pallet movement. Loads must stay within rated limits and remain away from unprotected edges, so rolling, tipping, or weight shift movement stays contained. In a panel stacking line, a sheet pushed toward the feeder suddenly reverses, driving back into the work area. Feed large sheets only from a controlled push point with the return path clear. Stop the line, square the panel, and reset the feed before forcing material into the rollers. Check guides, stops, and roller direction before restoring automatic feed. When the feed line resists or catches the sheet unevenly, the panel's momentum can reverse toward the open work area. A wide, rigid sheet can shift force quickly through its full surface. A feeder can send material back without warning. Stop, align, confirm feed direction, then restart. In a machine shop, loose clothing brushes a spinning lathe during polishing, catches the rotation, and moves into the shaft path. Set a hard clearance between clothing, polishing cloth, and rotating work. Secure sleeves, remove loose fabric, and stop the lathe before repositioning near the chuck or shaft. In a service lane beside a loading area, a delivery scooter contacted a pallet position, changing the vehicle's travel route instantly. Verify a clear travel route before entering loading zones. Keep pallets, equipment, and stored materials outside the vehicle movement envelope and secure cargo before approaching shared work areas. When a moving scooter contacts a fixed object, forward momentum is interrupted while unsecured cargo can shift rapidly. That load shift changes balance, reduces steering control, and extends the hazard beyond the original contact point. Small obstacles become major hazards when combined with speed and shifting cargo. Keep travel routes clear, secure loads, and slow down near storage and loading areas. Inside a storefront under renovation, a warning about a possible gas leak was raised, but work activities continued as a flammable atmosphere silently accumulated. Any report of a gas odor requires an immediate stop work response. Continue construction, electrical, cutting, or equipment activities only after the source is identified, isolated, tested, and declared safe. Inside the cement processing area, maintenance activity was underway when a large rotating drum released a dense cloud of processed material across the work area. Isolate all energy sources, secure stored materials, control startup conditions, and confirm equipment is placed in a safe maintenance state before inspection, cleaning, or repair activities begin. Large rotating process equipment can contain stored mechanical energy, accumulated material, heat, and pressure even after normal operation stops. If these conditions release unexpectedly, process contents can discharge rapidly into the surrounding area. Equipment can contain stored energy long after movement stops. Control the energy and secure the process before maintenance begins. At the tire service area, the mounted wheel was being handled when stored air pressure released and turned the assembly into an uncontrolled pressure release hazard. Inspect tire assemblies, confirm wheel compatibility, use approved restraint systems, and maintain clear exclusion zones around pressurized tires throughout handling, inflation, and service operations. At a refuse truck hopper, a sealed rubbish bag entered the compactor, then dry ash released outward through the rear loading area. Keep ash, dust, and fine powder waste out of normal compaction until cooled, dampened, sealed correctly, and clearly identified. Unknown residue needs separate disposal control before pressure is applied at the hopper. Compaction squeezes trapped air through powder and weak plastic. When pressure spikes, the bag ruptures, aerosolizing fine ash through the open loading path with sudden expansion. Dry ash needs cooling, moisture, labeling, and separate handling. Control the waste stream before compression turns hidden powder into a sudden release. At a poolside patio, a large window frame moves along the narrow deck, then stable footing is lost beside the open water. Establish dry, clear footing before moving large frames near pools, steps, or tight corners. Wide loads need a planned route, balanced grip points, open turning space, and a cleared edge path before movement begins. Inside an auto repair shop, a car being guided onto a service ramp suddenly accelerated forward, turning ramp alignment into uncontrolled forward movement. Ramp loading requires crawl speed, clear stop points, verified ramp alignment, and controlled communication before the vehicle climbs the ramp. The approach path must stay open, brake control must remain ready, and movement should stop until the vehicle is fully positioned. A small throttle surge can quickly turn ramp alignment into forward momentum. Once the tires load the ramp path, limited clearance reduces correction time and transfers force into nearby equipment or fixed surfaces. Guide ramp loading at crawl speed only. Set stop points, confirm signals, and keep the forward path control. Inside a factory workspace, LPG cutting on a metal container introduced sparks into a confined structure with hidden fuel vapor potential. Hot work in enclosed structures requires atmospheric testing, ventilation, hose inspection, and fuel vapor verification before cutting begins. Sparks must not enter confined containers, hidden voids, or enclosed spaces until combustible residue is fully cleared. In a steel fabrication bay, a gantry crane lift went unstable as an iron girder lost control and shifted across the stock area. Establish a clear exclusion path before every beam lift. Verify sling angle, hook position, balance point, tagline control, and load security before the girder leaves the stack. Always maintain full clearance beneath and beside the suspended beam. A long girder can rotate when its center of gravity is not directly under the hook. Once balance shifts, gravity and swing momentum drive the load into an uncontrolled drop path. A suspended beam must be balanced before it moves. Secure the lift, clear the path, then hoist. At a slag handling pit, a loader tips molten slag into a dump area where unseen moisture suddenly flashes into a rapid steam release. Verify the pit condition before any molten material is released. Check for hidden water, damp buildup, trapped runoff, and low spots where moisture can sit beneath slag or debris. In a sanitary ware production area, one unit being moved disturbed a tightly packed storage row, triggering chain reaction movement across the lineup. Before relocating any item from a stacked or nested arrangement, verify how the surrounding units are supported. Secure the remaining row before removing any piece that may be carrying side pressure or balance support. Closely spaced ceramic products can transfer force from one unit to the next when stability is lost. Once the center of gravity moves beyond the support base, momentum propagates through the row, creating a rapid domino effect. One unstable unit can release movement across an entire storage line. Secure the stack first, then move products in a controlled sequence. At the rear of a delivery truck, a large sheet shifted during unloading, sending the load into a tipping route. Establish a clear unloading sequence before releasing oversized material. Keep the unloading area clear of the possible tipping path until the load is restrained, supported, and fully controlled. On the oil rig drill floor, maintenance was underway around the top drive system when the massive link arm suddenly swept through its travel path without warning. Isolate hydraulic, mechanical, and gravitational energy sources before maintenance begins. Establish protected boundaries around equipment movement envelopes, and keep all access routes clear until the system is secured in a zero energy state. Top drive systems contain hydraulic force, suspended loads, and mechanical components capable of moving large masses through defined travel paths. If stored energy is released or motion controls are activated, the link arm can move rapidly and close available clearances within the operating envelope. Stored energy can remain present even when equipment appears inactive. Control the movement envelope before entering the work area. At the construction equipment work area, maintenance activity was underway near the portable air compressor when stored pressure suddenly released through the surrounding work area. Relieve, isolate, and control all stored pressure before servicing, inspecting, modifying, or repairing pressurized equipment. Maintain exclusion zones around components that could release compressed energy. Inside a tiled home room, a hairdryer overheated during use and released flame from the appliance housing. Stop use immediately when a heat appliance smells burnt, sounds abnormal, sparks, smokes, or runs hotter than normal. Keep intake vents clear, cords untangled, outlets dry, and nearby surfaces free of paper, plastic, fabric, or loose clutter. A hairdryer relies on airflow to keep the heating coil controlled. When airflow is blocked or wiring fails, resistance heat rises quickly until plastic, dust, or insulation ignites. Heat appliances need airflow, clean vents, and safe cords. Unplug at the first warning sign, clear nearby fuel, and replace overheated equipment. Inside a paper roll processing line, close access beside a rotating drum turns routine inspection into a pull-in hazard as loose floor material shifts. Stop and isolate the roll before inspection, cleaning, adjustment, or troubleshooting near the nip point. Guarding, floor clearance, and zero motion verification must be in place before any close access begins. Inside a diesel repair shop, an unsecured gas cylinder tipped during welder setup, turning compressed pressure into a projectile hazard. Pressurized gas cylinders must remain chained to stable walls, racks, or approved carts. Welding setup near unrestrained cylinders creates projectile risk if the valve or cylinder support fails. When an unrestrained cylinder valve breaks, compressed gas escapes through a narrow opening and creates thrust. That thrust can drive the cylinder across the floor as stored pressure rapidly vents. Always secure pressurized vessels. A single safety chain separates routine repairs from catastrophic facility damage. Inside a heavy manufacturing workshop, crane rigging shifted a tall metal casing, turning an upright load into a tipping path. Heavy machinery components require proper rigging, controlled attachment points, and verified stabilization before adjustment begins. Upright loads must be braced, shored, or held by rated lifting gear before cables, hooks, or attachment points are changed. The fall path must remain clear until the load is fully stabilized by the hoist. In a narrow processing room, an active crusher mixer keeps turning as its open hopper access crosses the intake feed path. Keep all mixing actions outside the live hopper opening. Use guarded tools, interlocked covers, and full shutdown before any object enters the intake path. Confirm the hopper cover cannot shift and keep controls within immediate reach during the process. A running crusher mixer creates constant downward draw while the blades rotate beneath the hopper. Once material bridges into the intake, torque pulls the feed path inward faster than manual control can counter. Lev mixing and open access cannot overlap. Guard the hopper, stop motion, then adjust the mix. Inside a lithium battery factory, smoke started low near stacked cells before heat release spread through dense storage. At the first sign of cell smoke popping or heat release, activate emergency response and isolate storage immediately. Keep lithium cells separated from packaging and dense inventory so heat cannot spread rapidly. On the edge of a high-rise construction floor, a single step onto an unsupported surface changed an access path into open-air exposure. Verify every walking and working surface before transferring weight near an edge. Never assume unfinished flooring, temporary covers, or partially supported sections can safely carry a load. A surface remains stable only while its support structure can transfer load into the building frame. When support is missing or incomplete, weight shifts the balance point beyond the available support area, resulting in immediate structural movement. An unfinished edge can look solid while hiding a critical support gap. Inspect, secure, and verify every surface before entering elevated work areas. Inside a crowded workshop, industrial equipment was being energized when a flash filled the entire space. Verify all covers, guards, wiring, and electrical connections before energization. Establish a clear exclusion boundary around energized equipment and keep the exposure area empty. Beside the riverbank, the massive boulder appeared stable until the support beneath it suddenly gave way and released its full weight. Downslope. Establish exclusion zones around unstable rock formations, erosion-affected slopes, and unsupported boulders, and keep all access routes outside potential rolling, sliding, and movement paths. Along the roadside drainage channel in wet conditions, a hidden electrical fault suddenly energized the surrounding area and changed the environment in an instant. Establish exclusion zones around flooded, damaged, or suspected energized utility areas, and treat water, metal structures, fencing, and nearby surfaces as energized until power has been isolated and the area secured. Electrical current can travel through conductive materials such as water, metal, wet soil, and concrete when a fault occurs. As energy leaves the original source, voltage gradients can develop across the surrounding area and extend well beyond the visible fault location. Electrical energy can travel far beyond the source of the fault. Stay clear and wait for the area to be secured. Inside a commercial kitchen, a gas-fired appliance was lit after fuel built inside the chamber, sending a rapid flame release through the opening. Ventilate and verify gas control before ignition. Burner valves, pilots, connections, and flame failure devices must be checked so unburned gas cannot collect behind the appliance door or near nearby storage below. Gas spreads invisibly and mixes with air until it reaches an ignitable range. A spark can then trigger rapid combustion, expanding hot gases outward through the easiest open path. Delayed ignition means fuel collected before flame appeared. Shut gas, ventilate, wait, and relight only after the appliance is verified safe. In a residential courtyard, a live firework entered a septic tank opening, triggering trapped biogas beneath the concrete surface. Keep fireworks, flames, sparks, and heat sources away from septic covers, drains, utility holes, and underground tanks. Any opening connected to waste gas must stay covered, marked, secured, and treated as a possible ignition point. Inside a high-voltage electrical room, a switchgear check began near energized equipment, turning the panel into an arc flash exposure point. Switchgear inspection requires verified de-energization before enclosures open. Lockout/tagout must isolate all power sources and arc flash-rated controls. Barriers and PPE must be in place as secondary protection against unexpected electrical discharge. Opening the energized panel likely disturbed internal components, bridging a gap between high-voltage elements. That unintended current path can create an arc flash, releasing heat, pressure, and vaporized metal from the enclosure. Verify every panel de-energized before opening. Isolation comes before enclosure access. Inside an industrial processing area, work near large hot liquid vats turned unstable when containment began releasing material into the workspace. High-temperature processing areas require controlled distance, automated transfer where possible, containment barriers, and verified equipment condition. Hot liquid movement must remain separated from access paths, with barriers designed to contain release paths if vessel or transfer control fails. In a tire service bay, a pressurized tire assembly released stored pressure energy, driving air force and loose components outward from the assembly. Use a certified tire cage or remote inflation system during high-pressure tire servicing. Stand outside the release path, inspect rim condition, verify bead seating, and control pressure slowly during inflation or repair. Confirm all split ring components are fully matched before adding pressure. A pressurized tire stores energy like a compressed vessel. When the bead, rim, or casing loses integrity, stored pressure can release rapidly and drive rim parts or loose components outward. A tire under pressure is stored energy waiting for control. Inspect, cage, stand clear, and inflate remotely. In a warehouse aisle, a forklift tried to turn with a raised work platform, shifting the elevated load and pulling the machine off balance. Turn only with the platform lowered and the forklift's center of gravity controlled. Position the truck first, set the brake, secure the basket, then raise personnel only for stationary work. At the base of an operating escalator, maintenance access entered an unguarded moving mechanism. Apply full lockout and confirm zero movement before opening access panels or reaching into any conveyor, escalator, or rotating system. Controls alone are not enough to confirm a safe work condition. Escalator drive systems contain continuous in-running points where moving parts pull material toward the mechanism. Once contact occurs, rotating components can draw objects inward until motion is fully isolated. Moving equipment remains a hazard until all energy sources are isolated and verified. Lockout, test for zero movement, and secure access before maintenance begins. At a busy city intersection, an excavator moved forward while its swing area and route remained unprotected. Establish a clear exclusion boundary around mobile equipment before movement begins. Do not allow pedestrian access through the machine's travel path, blindside area, or counterweight swing radius. Inside the tire service shop, a long metal pole was left unsecured near the entrance when it tipped and swept across the public access area. Store long materials in secured racks, holders, or designated storage locations. Prevent pipes, bars, poles, and similar items from leaning freely in access routes or work areas. Inside the fabrication workshop, the compressed gas cylinder suddenly lost stability and released stored energy, filling the work area with smoke within seconds. Secure compressed gas cylinders with approved restraints, stable supports, and protective valve caps during storage, transport, and use, and prevent cylinders from standing unsecured in active work areas. Compressed gas cylinders contain significant stored pressure energy within a confined vessel. If a cylinder falls and critical components such as valves, regulators, or connections are damaged, the rapid release of gas can generate powerful forces and displace nearby materials. Compressed gas cylinders remain energy storage devices even when not in use. Secure the cylinder and protect the valve at all times. Inside the busy warehouse loading area, a forklift entered the travel route, and the available clearance suddenly disappeared. Separate forklift routes from access routes using barriers, marked walkways, controlled crossings, visibility controls, and protected exclusion zones around moving industrial vehicles. On a narrow street, roadworks lane, an unguarded excavation sat beside traffic flow, turning the pavement edge into an open pit hazard. Barricade every roadworks excavation before traffic is allowed through. Cones alone are not enough. Rigid barriers, warning signs, lighting, edge covers, and lane separation must control the approach path. A motorcycle needs continuous tire contact and clear steering space. Broken pavement and loose edge material reduce traction, letting gravity pull the front wheel into the excavation. Open pits need physical protection, not just visibility. Block the edge, reroute traffic, light the work area, and cover access gaps before movement begins. On a residential street utility pole, ladder access reaches a fuse box just before an electrical arc flashes across the live connection. De-energize and verify isolation before any fuse, pole box, or overhead service work begins. Live electrical parts need rated tools, arc protection, dry access, and confirmed clearance from every exposed conductor. Inside a construction yard, crane loading over a flatbed shifted suddenly, turning the truck bed into a drop impact receiving area. Rigging equipment must be thoroughly inspected before lifting operations begin. A sudden failure of lifting gear transfers massive, uncontrolled force to the receiving structure, exceeding design limits and instantly destabilizing the entire loading zone. The rigging, or hoist mechanism, lost support, allowing the suspended load to drop onto the bed and transfer stored gravitational energy into the truck structure. Verify crane rigging integrity before hoisting. Keep drop paths controlled and clear during lifting. Outside a supermarket delivery area, a tall pallet load shifted on the lift mechanism, turning unloading into an unstable weight transfer hazard. Liftgate unloading on inclines requires strict load control protocol. Heavy elevated loads must stay centered, rated limits must be verified, and equipment positioning should keep gravity-driven roll or forward acceleration contained before movement begins. In a paper rolling machine bay, folded sheets moved forward, unfolded under tension, and turned into an uncontrolled moving load. Control folded sheets before they build momentum. Use a slower feed, fixed guides, and a clear release point so the sheet movement cannot take over the work path. Confirm no loose edges remain trapped before restarting the roll. Large folded sheets can store momentum as they swing or unfold. When the mass moves forward, force transfers through the sheet and can pull the handling position out of control. A folded sheet can turn into a moving load, slow the feed, guide the fold, and keep release space clear. In a warehouse staging bay, wooden balance blocks were still being positioned under a raised cabinet when the forklift released the load too early. Set the drop area only after the load is held, communicated, and confirmed. No cabinet, panel, or pallet should be lowered until the support blocks are fully placed, the floor path is clear, and one clear signal authorizes the release. Inside a textile production area, a rotating feed roll changed a routine adjustment into a material draw event. Before approaching feed rollers, isolate all motion sources and verify zero movement. Never enter a nip point, roller throat, or material feed path while rotational energy remains available. Counter-rotating rollers create an in-running nip point that continuously pulls material toward the narrowing gap. Once material enters the nip, friction and roller torque can accelerate the draw-in process until the equipment is stopped and isolated. Rotating rollers do not recognize tools, materials, or unintended contact. Energy isolation, guarding, and safe clearance are the only reliable barriers against draw-in hazards. During a crane-assisted lift, a suspended pole lost stability and swung out of its intended position. Verify lifting points, balance, and load control before any maintenance or adjustment work begins. Keep all access, work, and observation areas outside the potential fall path and swing path of suspended loads. At the fast food kitchen service counter, a routine task near powered equipment entered a rotating path, while an unguarded mechanism remained in motion. Secure loose material, cords, accessories, and flexible items before operating equipment. Keep guards installed and maintain separation from rotating, moving, and pinch point components at all times. Rotating shafts, rollers, and drive components continuously transfer motion through friction and mechanical contact. Once flexible material enters the rotating path, moving components can draw it further into the system until motion is stopped and isolated. Moving equipment can extend its motion path beyond the machine itself. Control entanglement sources before approaching operating equipment. At the tire service bay, air pressure was being applied to the wheel assembly when stored energy was released through the surrounding area. Use inflation cages, remote air lines, pressure control devices, and protected standoff positions during tire inflation. Keep access routes outside potential release and trajectory paths before pressurization begins. Inside an automated panel line, manual movement entered the gantry's travel path as the transfer head swept across the loading bed without a protected stop. Keep all movement outside the programmed travel envelope until the machine is stopped, isolated, and verified safe. A fast transfer head must never share space with loose handling, material repositioning, or adjustment activity. The gantry carries moving mass along a fixed rail path, so its kinetic energy stays concentrated in one rapid line. Stop the cycle before any movement enters the machine path. Guard the sweep path before automation takes control. On a high-rise concrete frame, a temporary edge frame opens outward, turning the upper-level work area into an exposed vertical drop path. Secure temporary frames before access begins. Edge panels, hinge points, clamps, locks, and anchor connections must be verified so no frame can swing open under load, movement, or contact. Inside an elevated fixture workspace, ladder positioning and overhead adjustment combined, turning a routine setup into sudden support loss exposure. Heavy wall-mounted fixtures must anchor directly into structural studs or rated backing, not standard drywall anchors. Ladder positioning, load support, and secondary stabilization must be confirmed before overhead adjustment begins. The screen lacks adequate structural support as lateral force is applied to the casing. The mounting hardware shears from the wall. The shifted center of mass pulls the heavy equipment downward, collapsing the ladder support structure beneath. Verify fixture load ratings before overhead adjustment. Structural backing and stable access control prevent support loss exposure. Inside a commercial garage, a freestanding compressed gas cylinder tipped toward the floor, turning a simple handling mistake into pressure release danger. Pressurized containers must remain secured with chains, racks, or approved carts. Unsecured cylinders require controlled handling because valve damage can release stored pressure and create facility-wide projectile movement. In a warehouse aisle, a forklift traveling too fast crossed a floor, irregularity, lost stability, and tipped into the travel path. Keep forklift speed low enough for floor joints, pallet edges, debris, and uneven surfaces. Scan ahead before accelerating. Maintain control through open aisles, and follow rollover response procedures when stability changes. Speed adds momentum, and a small bump can shift the forklift's center of gravity outside the stability triangle. Once the chassis passes that balance point, machine weight drives the rollover. A tipping forklift cannot be stopped by reaction. Slow the travel, clear the path, and follow rollover training. At a dockside mooring station, a signal goes out before the line path clears, and the tightened hawser snaps into motion. Do signal the operator only from a clear, protected position. Confirm the mooring line, hook, and snapback path are clear before winch movement, vessel movement, or tension changes begin. Inside a workshop loading area, cutting began on a secured tank and released a fast-moving flame spread. Confirm contents, pressure condition, and atmospheric hazards before cutting, grinding, or removing restraints from any tank, vessel, or container. Regard every closed container as energized until verified otherwise. Residual fuel vapor, flammable gas, or internal pressure can remain trapped inside a container even when it appears inactive. Cutting operations can introduce heat, sparks, or mechanical release forces that ignite vapors or trigger a rapid energy release. A container's appearance never reveals its stored energy. Verify, isolate, vent, and test before releasing restraints or starting hot work. In a stone fabrication yard, a large slab broke free from its resting position and swept across the storage lane. Secure. Stable support, restraint and separation before handling any upright slab or panel. Friction, lean angle, and adjacent materials are not reliable load control systems. At the quarry unloading area, the dump truck raised its bed on uneven ground as the shifting load gradually pulled the vehicle beyond its stability margin. Operate dump trucks only on firm, level surfaces, maintain straight alignment during dumping, and stop operations immediately if load distribution, ground conditions, or vehicle stability begin to change. As the dump bed rises, the vehicle's center of gravity moves upward and becomes increasingly sensitive to side-loading forces. Uneven ground, material adhering to one side of the bed, or chassis twist can shift the load path and reduce the truck's resistance to overturning. Raised dump bodies amplify every stability condition, level the surface, and monitor load movement throughout the dump cycle. Inside the factory production line, routine access beneath the machine entered a rotating path while an unguarded mechanism remained in motion. Secure loose material, cords, and accessories before approaching operating equipment. Keep guards in place and isolate all motion sources before entering machine access areas. On a construction structure, a long steel bar protrudes forward from the frame, then sweeps sideways through the access path. Controlled protruding steel before movement continues around the frame. Long bars need end caps, tiebacks, barricades, and clear side clearance, so forward motion cannot turn the exposed end into a lateral strike hazard. A long bar acts like a lever, carrying force far beyond its support point. When the frame shifts, the protruding end travels in a wide side arc with little warning. Protruding steel needs restraint and marked clearance. Cap the end, tie it back, block the side path, and stop movement when steel extends beyond the frame. On a Night Street roadworks lane, an uncovered excavation sat inside the traffic path, turning the road edge into an open pit hazard. Barricade and cover every fresh road excavation before traffic continues. Warning tape is not enough. Rigid barriers, lighting, reflective signs, edge protection, and lane diversion must guide movement away from the opening. At a muddy construction site, a crane-hoisted steel pipe slipped from rigging, turning the lift path into sudden load drop exposure. A strict exclusion area must remain beneath suspended loads. Rigging systems require verified grip, correct hitching, and controlled lift path clearance before hoisting begins. A lifting sling can lose grip on smooth cylindrical pipe if friction or hitch geometry is inadequate. Once tension becomes unbalanced, the strap can slide and gravity pulls the load straight down through the lift path. Inspect lifting gear before hoisting. Secure proper hitches on round loads before movement begins. Inside a warehouse, backward cart movement approached an open freight elevator shaft, turning material handling into a floor opening hazard. Freight elevator areas require full attention to floor openings, travel direction, and backing paths. Mobile devices and other distractions must stay out of material handling tasks, and open shaft access must be guarded or blocked before cart movement continues. In an outdoor workyard, a forklift releases a suspended machine, and the fork dropped into an uncleared load path. Keep the fork drop path fully clear before lifting, lowering, or releasing machinery. Land the load completely, lower the forks, mark the clearance boundary, and verify the path before access resumes. A forklift fork can descend suddenly when load balance shifts or hydraulic control changes. Once the machine drops, gravity drives the fork and load path straight down with no reaction time. A raised fork path must stay empty until the load is grounded. Clear the area, lower the forks, then approach. In a foundry bay, a molten pour contacted trapped moisture, releasing steam, smoke, sparks, and heat across the mold area. Verify every mold cavity and tool is dry, vented, and preheated before molten metal is introduced. Keep the pour rate controlled and the surrounding area clear for sudden steam release. At a fuel station service lane, an SUV rolled into a maintenance area and crossed a ground-level work path. Isolate vehicle movement before beginning any inspection, cleaning, or maintenance task around wheels or undercarriage areas. Establish barriers, parking controls, and positive vehicle immobilization before entering the vehicle travel path. Even at low speed, a vehicle's mass generates significant momentum and tire force. When movement occurs unexpectedly, the travel path can close faster than nearby work can be safely cleared. A stationary vehicle is safe only when its movement is physically controlled. Block the wheels, secure the vehicle, and separate maintenance work from active traffic paths. Inside a warehouse aisle, a forklift carrying a tall, stacked load moved forward while visibility ahead was almost completely blocked. When a load obstructs the travel path, stop and restore visibility before moving. Use a spotter, travel in the safe direction, or reposition the load so the intended path remains visible at all times. Inside a machine shop, uneven rope control altered the suspended machine's load path and stability. Suspended loads require controlled force application, balanced restraint systems, and coordinated load path management. Conflicting force inputs can rapidly destabilize suspended equipment. On top of the rail tanker carrying phosphorus, routine work near the cargo hatch suddenly triggered a fireball and pressure release. Confirm product condition, isolation status, and ignition controls before opening or sampling reactive chemical containers, and follow hazardous material procedures throughout hatch access work. Phosphorus can react rapidly when exposed to air, heat, or incompatible conditions, releasing intense energy through fire and pressure expansion. If reactive vapors or residues remain inside a confined tanker space, opening the system can quickly change the atmosphere and trigger a sudden release. Reactive chemicals can change fast when exposure conditions shift. Control the atmosphere before opening the container. At the scrapyard shear station, routine feeding into the metal cutting machine suddenly entered the active cutting area while the blades remained energized. Keep all access outside feed openings, shear blades, and moving machine boundaries, and isolate, lock out, and test equipment before clearing jams or inspecting cutting areas. A warehouse truck bay. A heavy metal pipe is lowered onto the truck bed. Then its weight rolls the cylinder off the side. Control round loads before they touch the deck. Heavy pipes need cradles, chocks, side stops, and a slow lowering plan, so landing force cannot become uncontrolled rolling movement. A pipe stores mass on a curved contact surface. When it drops onto a flat bed, impact and gravity can overcome friction and start rotation. Round steel does not stay still by itself. Chock the pipe, block the side, lower slowly, verify deck level, and keep the roll path clear before release. Inside a factory loading bay, a load was dropped onto the floor as the overhead lift platform descended into the same path. Keep the lift travel path locked out before loading, unloading, or placing material below. Raised platforms need verified brakes, cables, stops, sensors, and mechanical blocking before floor-level material handling continues. Inside a textile factory, fabric movement near a winding machine entered the roller path, turning production flow into drawn exposure. Exposed rotating equipment requires strict isolation, fixed guarding, and secured loose material before operation or maintenance begins. Active systems must be fully de-energized before jam clearing, adjustment, or access near the roller path. Continuous roller rotation creates an in-running nip point. Any material introduced into that area can snag, gain traction, and feed into the mechanism under the machine's rotating force. Maintain strict clearance from moving machinery. Guarding and isolation control the roller path. Inside a deep, unshored trench, excavator vibration and unstable soil combined, turning the wall face into a sudden collapse hazard. Excavation operations require mandatory shoring, sloping, or shielding. Vertical wall faces must be stabilized when digging beyond established depth limits. Reinforcement, vibration control, and soil evaluation keep trench movement contained. In an auto shop bay, a yellow-marked lift arm protrudes into the walkway, creating a fixed obstruction in the travel route. Keep lift arms parked outside active walking paths when the hoist is not in use. Marking improves visibility, but the safest control is removing the obstruction from the travel path and keeping routes open. A lift arm sits low and extends outward from the column, where it can be missed during normal movement. Once the walking path crosses that fixed edge, the collision happens instantly. A marked obstruction is still an obstruction. Park lift arms clear and keep walkways open. In a textile warping area, a running warp beam keeps pulling thread while access moves too close to the rotating roller path. Set a fixed boundary around the warping machine before the beam turns. Use guards, stop controls, and full shutdown before adjusting yarn, clearing wraps, or reaching near the roller side. Working shop, a large panel change direction, turning the feed line into a material travel hazard. Position material against proper guides and supports before feeding it into cutting equipment. Keep access outside the board's possible return path whenever rotating machinery is active. When wood twists, binds, or contacts a rotating blade at the wrong angle, stored energy can be released instantly. The spinning blade can transfer force back into the panel, accelerating it rapidly along the feed path and creating a powerful kickback hazard. Kickback can develop with almost no warning. Control the material, maintain alignment, and keep clear of the board's potential travel path. At a freight unloading area, a package dropped from the unloading process and released stored energy as it was moved. Stop unloading when package contents, stored energy sources, or load conditions are unknown. Verify stability and hazard controls before moving any item from a transport vehicle. At the construction site, the suspended pallet of masonry materials suddenly lost stability above the work area and entered an uncontrolled fall path. Establish exclusion zones beneath lifted, elevated, or suspended materials. Keep all access routes outside lift and landing areas, and maintain separation until loads are fully supported and secured. Elevated materials store gravitational potential energy while their weight is supported by lifting equipment, rigging, or temporary positioning systems. If load stability, support, or restraint is lost, that stored energy converts immediately into downward movement along the load path. Every elevated load creates a potential fall path. Control the lift area and keep access routes clear. On the upper level of the construction project, the unprotected edge and unfinished work surface suddenly turned a routine movement into a loss of support event. Install guardrails, secure walking surfaces, and establish approved fall protection systems before elevated work begins, and keep access routes away from open edges, floor openings, and incomplete structures. Inside a dusty production plant, an elevated hopper handle was turned from an unstable foothold, turning a simple adjustment into sudden open edge exposure. Elevated equipment adjustments need a proper access platform, guarded edge protection, and a stable working position before any handle, valve, or lever is operated. Reaching from a narrow rim or improvised foothold turns a simple adjustment into an open edge exposure. Turning a stiff handle creates side loading through the access point and adds torque to the upper frame. On a small elevated surface, that force can shift the center of gravity beyond the available support. Use fixed access, guarded platforms, and secure footing for elevated adjustments. No handle operation should rely on balance alone. Inside an industrial workshop, close access over an active lathe placed loose material near an unguarded rotating shaft. Exposed shafts require robust physical guarding, fitted apparel standards, secured loose material, and controlled clearance before rotation begins. Operating rotary equipment must stay separated from all access paths that could place loose items near the shaft. On a truck bed nearby, welding sends sparks into leftover flammable material, and the ignition flashes across the bed surface fast. Clear and shield the truck bed before welding starts. Remove flammable material, cover nearby surfaces, control spark travel, and assign fire watch until the area fully cools and no smoldering residue remains. Welding sparks carry enough heat to ignite fuel when they land on combustible residue, cloth, or packaging. With oxygen present, the fire tetrahedron completes and flame can spread across the truck bed quickly. Hot work turns small fuel into fast fire on a loaded truck bed. Clean the bed, shield sparks, and watch the area after welding ends. Inside a production area, a routine machine adjustment moved into an energized equipment space. Never, ever perform adjustments, clearing, or inspection work inside a machine's operating envelope until all hazardous motion has been isolated and verified at zero energy. Rotating, reciprocating, and powered machine components can create draw-in and pinch hazards. Once material or an unintended contact point enters the movement path, machine force continues according to the equipment's motion cycle until isolated. Routine tasks become high risk when hazardous motion remains available. Isolate the energy, verify the stop, then access the machine space. Inside a manufacturing facility, a forklift was left unattended during an unexpected event, and the vehicle entered an uncontrolled travel route. Establish vehicle control before addressing any other situation. Powered industrial trucks must be stopped, secured, and immobilized before the operator leaves. Inside the vehicle repair bay, the raised truck cab suddenly lost its secure position and entered a gravity-driven movement path. Engage mechanical cab locks, install secondary supports, and secure all elevated vehicle components before maintenance begins. And never depend solely on hydraulic systems to maintain position. A raised truck cab stores significant gravitational potential energy while elevated above its normal resting position. If a locking mechanism, support device, or retaining system is absent or disengaged, gravity can rapidly return the cab along its natural travel path. Elevated components require positive mechanical restraint. Secure the support system before entering the work area. In a panel production line, an automated gantry head sweeps across the table while access enters the active machine envelope. Establish interlocked guarding around the full travel path before automatic movement begins. Use locked gates, presence sensing, and full isolation before any access near the panel table. Confirm emergency stop access before any table cycle starts. On a nighttime roadside cleanup zone, a yellow service truck enters a cluttered work lane and collides with parked waste vehicle separate moving traffic from active cleanup equipment before roadside work continues. Use cones, spotters, lighting, and a controlled vehicle path so trucks never enter the same narrow space as staged containers. Confirm blind corners before trucks enter the active cleanup lane. A moving truck carries momentum that keeps pushing forward after a late correction. In a tight roadside lane, parked equipment, debris, and poor clearance can turn one steering error into a multi-point path conflict. Roadside work needs space before motion begins. Mark the lane, control traffic, and keep equipment clear. In a metal stamping line, a live power press cycles repeatedly as feed access moves between strokes into the active die area. Use fixed guarding, two-hand controls, light curtains, or feed tools before press cycling begins. Keep the die area isolated from manual access whenever the ram is energized. Confirm part placement before each controlled stroke. In a waste loading yard, a truck's hydraulic arm swept through loose scrap, hooked the load, and turned the side area into a side pull hazard. The truck side sweep zone must be cleared before hydraulic movement begins. Loose scrap, carts, and narrow chassis clearance can create hidden catch points where the arm hooks material and transfers force through the operating envelope. Safe control means a full stop, a marked exclusion boundary, confirmed visibility, and no restart until the arm's route is clear. A hydraulic arm carries strong rotational force through a fixed sweep. Once loose material is hooked, that force can pull the load sideways and turn the area into a side pull hazard. Clear the side path before the hydraulic cycle starts. No clear sweep path. No restart. Inside a production area, equipment adjustments continued around an energized machine as moving components remained exposed. Set a clear boundary around energized equipment and complete isolation before adjustments begin. Closing gaps, rotating assemblies, and other moving components must remain inaccessible during troubleshooting. On a reversing trailer truck bed, unsupported tall stacked glass panels shifted slightly, tipped outward, and spread loose glass material across the roadway. Secure upright glass panels with rated restraints, side bracing, and stable rack support before any trailer movement. Keep reversing slowly, controlled, and clear of sudden shifts that can send the load past its balance point. Tall glass panels carry a high center of gravity with very little tolerance for side movement. Once the stack leans beyond its support, gravity redirects the load into an outward tipping path. Unsupported glass becomes unstable with one small shift. Brace the panels, secure the load, then move. In a rolling mill bay, a hot steel bar cobbles during adjustment, sweeping into a fast arc across the mill floor. Keep rolling mill adjustment isolated from live bar energy. Use cobble guards, remote adjustment points, emergency stops, and clear mill floor boundaries before any guide or alignment change. Verify containment shields before opening any adjustment access. Inside a textile mill, active fabric rollers pulled material through a nip point, turning close access into rapid draw-in exposure. Rotating equipment requires controlled distance, secured loose material, physical guarding, and fast-acting emergency stops near nip points. Startup must not occur until exposed in-running rollers are guarded or isolated. Large spinning cylinders create powerful in-running nip points. As continuous fabric feeds onto the spool, the convergence area can grip introduced material and pull attached objects into the pinch point at machine speed. Industrial rollers generate immense draw-in force. Distance guarding and isolation are the primary controls. Inside a woodworking shop, a small offcut was fed beside an exposed table saw blade, turning routine trimming into sudden blade path exposure. Table saw work needs guarded cutting, controlled feed pressure, and push stick use whenever material gets short or narrow. Loose offcuts, unstable feed control, and close positioning beside the blade path create unnecessary exposure during even simple trimming. Inside a chemical processing unit, a pressurized system released stored energy in a rapid flash beside running equipment. Normal appearance is not proof of zero energy. Verify isolation, pressure release, temperature status, and chemical condition before treating any quiet system as safe. Inside a vehicle service bay, a raised car lost stable support over the lift area. When vehicle support becomes unstable, the surrounding area must remain clear until the load is mechanically secured. Use rated stands, verified lift points, and controlled lowering methods before access continues. Inside the auto repair shop, the routine service bay suddenly became an active vehicle path when a car entered the workspace without control. Verify the vehicles are secured, under control, and protected against unintended movement before beginning work. And keep service activities outside active vehicle travel paths whenever possible. At a mine shaft transfer station, a loaded cart was pushed toward a hoist landing while the shaft opening was exposed. Verify the hoist cage is present, locked and aligned at the landing before any cart transfer begins. Use interlocked gates, stop blocks, and fixed barriers to prevent equipment movement whenever the shaft opening is exposed. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insight could save a life. Take care.